The morning of my sister's wedding, my mother called me into the kitchen before anyone else was awake. She was standing at the counter with her coffee, still in her robe, and she didn't turn around when I walked in. That was the first sign. "Claire," she said, "I need you to promise me something." I poured myself a cup and waited. "Don't wear the uniform today." I set the pot down slowly. Outside, the Georgia sky was just starting to go pink at the edges, the kind of quiet October morning that makes you think everything is going to be fine. I should have known better. "Mom, it's your sister's day." She finally turned around. Her eyes were already doing that thing, that particular combination of pleading and blame that she had perfected over 30 years. "Not everything has to be about your career." I was 31 years old. I had been a United States Army officer for 8 years. I held the rank of captain, had done 2 tours overseas, one in Kuwait and one in eastern Afghanistan, had been decorated twice, and had recently been selected for early promotion to major. None of that had ever impressed my mother. What impressed my mother was that my sister Danielle was marrying a man named Brandon, whose family owned 4 car dealerships in the greater Atlanta area, and the reception was being held at a country club in Buckhead, and my mother did not want anything disrupting the photographs. "I wasn't planning to make a scene," I said. "I know you weren't, honey. I just think civilian clothes. Something nice. You have that green dress." I did have a green dress. I'd bought it 2 years ago for a cousin's graduation and worn it exactly once. My mother had approved of it because it was modest and feminine and did not in any way suggest that I had spent the better part of a decade learning how to lead soldiers through terrain that would make most people's nightmares look comfortable. I told her I would think about it. What I thought about, standing there in the kitchen while the morning got lighter and I could hear my father's television starting up down the hall, was a conversation I'd had with my father 11 years ago. I was 19, and I had just told my parents I was going to enlist after 1 year of college. My father had muted the game and looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, "I don't understand why a girl like you would want to do something like that." "Not a girl like you." As if the problem was not with the idea, but with some specific deficiency in me, my mother had cried. Not the proud kind of crying. The other kind. My sister Danielle, who was 16 at the time and doing homework at the kitchen table, had not looked up from her textbook. She was always the sensible one. She knew which battles were worth having. I went to college for 1 year, like I said I would. And then I went to officer candidate school, which was its own particular kind of education. I will not tell you it was easy, because anyone who has been through it and says it was easy is either lying or was not paying attention. I will tell you that the hardest days of my life up to that point happened in the space of 12 weeks, and that by the end of them I understood something about myself that I had not understood before, that I was not going to stop. My family came to my commissioning. My mother wore a hat. My father shook my hand and said congratulations in the same tone of voice he used when Danielle got a good grade on an exam. They took a photograph with me in my dress uniform, and then my mother asked if I was hungry and whether we wanted to find somewhere for lunch. That was it. That was the celebration. Over the next 8 years, my family received the information about my life and career, the way you receive information about a neighbor's renovation project, politely interested in the updates, vaguely hoping it would be finished soon, not really understanding why anyone would choose to go through all of that. When I deployed the first time, my mother called the night before I flew out and spent most of the conversation talking about whether Danielle's boyfriend at the time was serious about her. When I came home, there was no one at the airport. I hadn't asked anyone to come. I knew better by then. What they did do was call me when they needed things. Danielle's car breaking down junior year of college. $2,000. My father's business going through a rough patch the year I came back from my second deployment. $3,500. My mother wanting to redo the kitchen. Could I help? Just a little, since I wasn't really spending money on much living on base. Another $1,500, which turned into $2,200 by the time the contractor finished. I gave it. I always gave it, because they were my family, and because I was not there, and because money was the one thing I could do from a distance. None of it was ever mentioned again, not as gratitude and not as debt. It simply disappeared. The way things disappear in families where certain subjects are never discussed. And then Danielle got engaged to Brandon, and there was the wedding, and there was my mother in the kitchen on a pink Georgia morning telling me not to wear my uniform. I went back upstairs and sat on the edge of the guest bed for a while. The uniform was hanging in the closet. I had traveled with it in its garment bag, pressed and correct, because I had assumed I realized now this was naive that I would wear it. that it was a formal occasion, that it was in fact exactly the kind of occasion for which dress uniforms existed. I thought about the green dress. I thought about my father saying a girl like you. I thought about 2 deployments in 8 years and $3,500 and no one at the airport. I got up and opened the closet. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock. I arrived at the church at 1:30, which is early enough that the parking lot still had space near the entrance, and late enough that most of the family was already inside and I would not have to stand around making conversation. I will tell you what I was wearing. Army service uniform, dress version, with the awards and decorations I had earned over 8 years of service. Captain's bars. The combat patch on my right shoulder from my deployment to Afghanistan. My hair was up and correct. Everything was regulation. I walked across the parking lot, and I heard someone stop talking mid-sentence. There was a group of people near the entrance, guests arriving and gathering, the usual pre-wedding cluster of people trying to figure out which side to sit on. I didn't know most of them. Brandon's family and friends from Atlanta, people from Danielle's work, college friends of hers I'd never met. And then I heard it. Someone said, not quietly enough, "Is that Danielle's sister?" Someone else said, "She's in the army?" And someone else I did not turn to see who said, "Oh, she's one of those." I kept walking. Inside the church it was cool and smelled like flowers and old wood and whatever those candles are made of, the kind that every church seems to have. An usher, one of Brandon's fraternity brothers, probably 22 years old, stopped when he saw me, and then very visibly did not know what to do. "Ma'am," he said. He actually straightened up a little. "Bride's side or groom's side?" "Bride's side," I said. He walked me down the aisle with a little more formality than he'd probably intended, and I could feel the heads turning as we went. Not all of them, but enough. My mother was in the 3rd row. I saw her face when she saw me. I had seen that face before. The particular stillness that meant she was very angry and had decided to be angry later, after the event, when she could do it properly. I sat down next to my Aunt Karen, who grabbed my arm and whispered, "You look incredible," and I loved her for it. My father was on my mother's other side. He looked at me once, briefly, and then looked away and did not look back. The ceremony was beautiful, I mean that sincerely. Danielle was stunning, the way brides always are, and she looked genuinely happy, and Brandon was crying before she even made it halfway down the aisle, which I found immediately and completely endearing. Whatever my feelings about the situation, I wanted my sister to be happy. I had always wanted that. When they said their vows, I thought, this is what I've been protecting. Not in a dramatic way, just as a fact. This ordinary, beautiful, irreplaceable thing. 2 people in a church making promises. This is the thing. I did not cry. I have a fairly high bar for crying after 8 years in the army, but I came close. The reception was at the country club, 20 minutes away. I rode with Aunt Karen, who spent the drive telling me about everything I had missed at the last family reunion, and asking me careful questions about where I was stationed and whether I liked it, the kind of questions that showed she was genuinely trying to understand rather than just making conversation. I appreciated her for that too. The country club was everything you would expect a Buckhead country club to be. Very white, very clean, with the kind of landscaping that requires constant professional attention and the kind of interior that has been designed to signal prosperity without appearing to try. There were round tables with tall floral centerpieces and a dance floor and a bar that was already doing good business when we arrived. I found my seat, which had been assigned I noticed at a table in the back corner. Not the worst table, but noticeably not the family table, which had my parents and my grandparents and Brandon's parents, and which I had not been placed at. I was at table 11. I sat down and introduced myself to the couple next to me, friends of Brandon's from college. They were friendly, and the woman asked about my uniform with genuine curiosity, not the loaded kind, and I spent a few minutes explaining the basics of rank structure to her, while her husband nodded along. Across the room, I could see my mother talking to Brandon's mother. She had not looked at my table yet. The cocktail hour went by. Dinner was served. The toasts happened. My father gave one short, warm, funny in the self-deprecating way he could be funny when he was comfortable, and I noticed that he mentioned Danielle's childhood and her college years and the moment he met Brandon, and did not mention me. I was her only sibling. He did not mention me. I ate my salmon and kept my expression neutral, which is a thing I have gotten quite good at. What I noticed, and what I had been noticing since the ceremony, was a cluster of men at 2 tables near the center of the room. Military bearing, even in civilian clothes. You can always tell. The way they sat. The way they tracked the room. Some of them older, late 40s, early 50s. Some my age or a little older. I counted at least a dozen. I didn't know who they were, Brandon's connections, presumably, or family friends, but I recognized what they were. I was deciding whether to get another glass of water when Brandon's father, a tall man named Gerald, tapped his glass and stood up. "I have one more toast," he said, "if y'all will bear with me." The room quieted. "Brandon tells me," Gerald said, "that his new sister-in-law is here with us tonight." He paused. "Captain Claire Henderson. 8 years of service. 2 deployments. Recently selected for promotion to major." I went very still. "I want to ask her to stand, if she doesn't mind." I stood. Because what else do you do? The room was looking at me. All of it. My mother's face was a study in controlled expression. My father's was unreadable. Gerald raised his glass. "To Captain Henderson. And to everyone who serves." And then it did not happen all at once. It happened in a ripple. One person, and then the next, and then the next. The men I had been watching stood up. All of them. And a few others besides. And Gerald's wife. And Aunt Karen. And Brandon himself, still in his wedding suit with the boutonniere slightly wilted, standing up at the head table with his glass raised. I counted afterward with Aunt Karen's help. 17 people had stood up. I am not going to tell you I didn't cry then. I did. Briefly and without making a production of it, but I did. And I am not embarrassed about it. What happened next was not dramatic, and I think that is why it has stayed with me. After dinner, during the dancing, Brandon found me near the bar. He was a little flushed from champagne and dancing and the general emotional intensity of a wedding day, and he pulled me into a hug that I was not expecting. "I hope that was okay," he said. "My dad asked me if it was okay and I said yes, but I should have asked you." "It was okay," I said. "I looked you up," he said, slightly sheepishly. "When Danielle told me what you do, I looked up your record. I hope that's not weird. He shook his head. "I didn't know. She hadn't told me most of it." I thought about that. I thought about what it meant that my sister's fiancé had found it necessary to look up his future sister-in-law on a military record database because the family had never adequately explained who she was. "It's not weird," I said. Later that night, close to midnight, my father found me on the terrace. The Atlanta skyline was visible in the distance, the lights of the city against the dark. He came and stood next to me and was quiet for a moment, which is his way of gathering himself. "I didn't know about the promotion," he said. "I was going to tell you," I said. "I hadn't found the right time." He was quiet again. Then, "I think I owe you an apology." I looked at him. "Not just for today," he said. He was looking at the skyline. "I didn't understand what you were doing. I still don't completely understand it, but I think I made you feel like it wasn't worth understanding." He paused. "That wasn't right. There are things you wait a long time to hear, and then when you hear them you find out they don't quite land the way you imagined, because you have grown in the intervening years into someone who no longer needs them the same way, and the relief is real but it is quieter than you expected." "Thank you," I said. He nodded. We stood there for another minute, looking at the city. "Gerald said some of those men are veterans he's worked with over the years," my father said. "He does hiring specifically for veterans. Has for 20 years. "I didn't know that," I said. "Neither did I." He finally looked at me. "There's a lot I didn't know. My mother came to find me before I left. It was late, after 1, and most of the guests had gone or were going, and Danielle and Brandon had already left for their hotel. My mother found me by the coat check and touched my arm. I turned around. She looked tired in the way that the end of a long emotional day makes you look. Foundations slightly settled, hair slightly fallen, the careful architecture of a formal occasion coming softly undone. She looked like my mother. Just my mother. "I was wrong this morning," she said, "to ask you that." I waited. "You should have worn it," she said. "You earned it." 3 words. You earned it. I had spent 8 years, 2 countries, more difficult days than I could count, waiting for some version of those 3 words. And here they were, at a little after 1 in the morning in a country club coat check in Buckhead, Georgia. "Thank you, Mom," I said. She hugged me then, a real one, and I let her, and we stood there for a moment. On the drive back to the hotel, Aunt Karen talked about her garden, the new raised beds she was putting in, what she was thinking of planting in the spring. I listened and answered and watched the Atlanta streets go by outside the window, lit up and moving even at that hour, the city carrying on the way cities do. I thought about what Gerald had said, about the men who had stood up, about the fact that there are people in the world who understand, without needing it explained, what it means to show up in a uniform, what it costs and what it means and why you don't put it in a closet because someone is worried about the photographs. I thought about the promotion. Major Henderson. I was going to be Major Henderson, and somewhere between Georgia and the installation where I was stationed, I was going to have to figure out what came next. The uniform was in its garment bag in the back seat, pressed and correct, the way I had brought it. I had worn it. That was enough. That was exactly enough.